Hi, this is Quinn with SF Indie Fest, and I'm really excited to be here today talking with the director of Sideways for Attention. We have Brady Bryson. Brady, welcome and thank you for sharing your film with SF Indie Fest.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Totally. Yeah, well, let's get into it. Can you just talk about the kind of genesis of the film and where the idea came from, and then through the early stages of
Yeah.
development?
Originally this was going to be a short film. I wrote it during the pandemic, and when writing it, it was just supposed to be about the ending of the film where we see her kill her abuser and we see her unfortunately commit suicide. But then the short film idea was originally we were going to go backwards and see how did she get to this place and see how, like, kind of like Memento in a way where it's like we just go backwards and we're trying to put the pieces all together. Um, then eventually it was like a 9-page short film script that went and became a 90-page script, and when it kind of expanded a lot. It became more than just that story. It became more of a story about personal trauma, and it became a story about national trauma. Mainly, it was originally heavily inspired by the pandemic. I mean, everybody knows that experience and knows where they were when lockdowns began and when everything kind of, the world changed in a way. Um, Originally was going to be taking place during the pandemic, and then it shifted over to September 11th because I wanted to draw that parallel of, like, we've kind of like every generation has lived through a moment where they remember where they were and they remember this national travesty. And then there's, I wanted to capture that feeling of somebody that is going through a personal tragedy and how they're trying to move forward through all this sadness in the
Yeah.
world, not just in the world, but also in their life.
It's kind of a unique thing to make, I guess, what it is technically a period piece, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's a period that's in relatively recent memory. Can you kind of speak to like some of the things you were thinking about stylistically? I mean, thematically, what you said makes a lot of sense, but how were you thinking about like costumes and styles, and how were you thinking about just shifting backwards 20 years in terms of the way you were directing people?
Well, for me, I'm a sucker for aesthetics. I really love that time period. I mean, I grew up. I was born in 2000, and I look back at that time period with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of memories, good and bad. And I wanted the time period. It's interesting. Like my generation, when we look at this time period, we look at it like in a very like kind of like comforting way, where it's like, to us it's like, oh, those are the good old days. Those were days where it's like it was bright colors and warm, and you were a kid and you didn't have to worry about anything. Where the reality of it is, it's the same as any other decade or year. It's just, it wasn't as bright and colorful. So the tone of it, I wanted to be very, dark, but at the same time I wanted the film to have this, aesthetic of it being kind of grungy, kind of grimy, an aesthetic of it being very, for lack of a better word, dark. And I had a lot of talks with, like, not just with the costume designer of the film, but also with with the art designer, with the art director, and the prop master, just to get an idea of like what can we do to make this spaces that we have available for filming represent the time period, but also what can we do to really establish that this is the year 2001. So like we went through like, okay, we went through like old computers that we could have in the schoolrooms, or like what laptops would they be using, or like the clothes, like the costume designers were like, this is what everybody wore back then. Like these are the kind of pants and the shoes and the shirts that we people wore. So like my costume designer one day, just we kind of just met up, and he just brought like probably like 3 or 4 like bags of just like old clothes from that time period. He just like went thrifting for like basically 72 hours straight, and just was like getting all these clothes, and uh, just to try to find something that represents the time period for
Yeah,
it. So, yeah, it's
that's
it's
a
it was,
point.
it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, but also like I'm very like particular. So
Yeah,
like something is like, for example, like the computers you see in the movie that are like, those are like functioning computers from that time period. So I was like, I don't want to use like any CGI. I want to like try to get that computer to work. So it was like like a little side quest while we're in pre-production trying to get this computer to work or trying to get like monitors to work. So yeah.
Well, I felt very seen as somebody who was in college at that time.
Awesome.
You did a convincing job of bringing me back to that world. Um, can you kind of tell me a little bit about like working with Courtney Campbell, who plays Chloe, and then Ted Sutherland, who plays Harry, and what you were kind of how you kind of came to work with them, and then what kind of directions you were giving. Particularly interested in, you know, the menace in Ted Sutherland's character.
Right. Yeah, so Courtney is my best friend. We knew each other in college. We met each other in our freshman year. We were both acting together at the new school, and we really just kind of hit it off. And we were always paired up together in like theater projects or in just in any like acting performances. So like we always were acting together and like learning from each other. And when writing the script at the time, I when it came time to casting, when it came time to cast for the script, I had her in mind, and I remember just like calling her, being like, "Hey, do you? I have this feature. I kind of have you in mind for. Would you like to be a part of this?" And she's mainly a theater kid. Like she only does theater. She's not really a fan of film. And when she read the script, she was like, I'm on board." Like she was just like, "I'm doing this." And right before production began, 2 months before, we sat down together for a weekend and we just went through every line, every action, step by step, for her to ask questions and to have an understanding of where this Chloe's mindset is in certain scenes and what she's feeling at certain times in the movie. And she is just such an amazing actor. She is somebody who is just not afraid to go there. And when it came time to be on set, you know, there were some scenes where we were like, okay, this is where I'm gonna let you just go into it and just go and like just have full control of the scenario. And there was other scenes where we're like, okay, just like how we like talked about before, this is the mindset of where she's at, and this is where, this is what I want out of you in this scene. Like for example, the mirror scene where she's in the bathroom, that scene was totally improvised. I just said to her, this is a scene where you could just do whatever you want. You could say whatever you want. You could do whatever you want. And we only did that in 2 takes. And the first take was just her like talking and like getting into it. And the second take, when she started slapping herself, I was like, oh my, okay. She went there and looking, and just she's somebody who's just really, really just an amazing person, and also just somebody I was so happy to have this experience with. Uh, Ted, we casted for. We watched his self tape, and he. I don't think he was acting. He just kind of like had that presence of like just going there without trying too hard. And I remember meeting up with him in person, and he was just somebody who was extremely dedicated. And he said, "This is how I want to play the character. I don't want to play it as a typical, predator. I want this character to be well liked in the beginning, and I want that switch to happen where you want to hate this person." And when I heard that, it just became like, okay, we're on the same page. We both get what we this is what we want the character to be. And he was just somebody who was just so dedicated with this role and just was always asking questions of like, how do you think I should be with this scene, or like, how do you think I should interact with Chloe in this like scenario in this circumstance? And we it was just he was just somebody that just was not afraid, like like Courtney, just not afraid to go there, but at the same time did it in a way that was very respectful and in a way that was very compelling. I hope that answered your questions. I ramble a lot
Yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting the way it's a very different process, it sounds like, between the two different characters, and they both were very well cast, I think. And the dynamic between them was really dynamic. Um, so in terms of also creative kind of decisions along the way, how did you come to want to work in this 4:3 aspect ratio? And can you tell me a little bit about that decision?
Yeah, I always loved watching films with that ratio. As a kid growing up, I always was used to that because of the TV that we had, the little like 34-inch TVs that we had, or like the 27-inch TVs we had. And I always found with that ratio, to me, it's very like claustrophobic and very tight. And I feel like everything is kind of like when you're depending on the film you're watching, you can feel like everything is like closing in or like you want to close in on what's happening. And I feel like that with that ratio, it does a good job of putting you in the perspective of the character that is on screen and showing the world that they're in. Uh, the main reason why I picked that is because I felt like with Chloe, the world is closing in on her, and I felt that ratio represented her within that film.
There was there something about this theme of unprocessed trauma and grief that kind of what made you kind of want to work with that subject matter?
Uh, a lot of it personal. A
Yeah.
lot of it personal. I've had some moments in my life where when things happened with me personally, I didn't process it directly. I kind of just like kind of put it away and didn't like think about it for a long time, and then something would happen where it would trigger that moment, and I'll be like, oh, it's all like kind of comes back to you. You know, processing trauma is something that is very interesting to me because if for some people it could hit them instantly and it could stay with them for a long time. And for a lot of people, it could happen to them and then it doesn't really trigger or process maybe like months or years down the road. Or there's people who are like me in a way where I kind of keep it down, kind of handle it. And I wanted to explore a character where she's holding in all this trauma and holding in all this angst and raw emotion and eventually it just explodes out of her. Yeah, so that's that.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you envision the relationship between Chloe and her stepfather? It was kind of a nuanced thing in the film, and I kept kind of trying to figure out where to land with it. So was that an iterative thing in the script, and how do you see their relationship?
I see the relationship as the two of them were in an unfortunate scenario. The actor who plays Doug, J.R. Carter, he we had a very long talk about that character, and we had a very long talk about the interactions with Chloe. And he personally related to the character because he told me once that he felt that there was this strong, he saw himself in that character of like wanting to reconnect and wanting to be there for somebody, not just like as a sense of a father, but as somebody there for somebody that is in pain. These characters are both in pain. Chloe has lost her mother abruptly, and Doug's lost his wife. And here they're both together, and they both have this raw emotion and this intensity that they have again towards each other for this loss that they both experienced, and they're both looking at it in different point of views. And I wanted to capture, a realistic version of that. And and with the flashbacks, I wanted to show that there's like this uncomfortability, but there's also this like kind of like mutual respect for one another. There's this moments of like, okay, you know, they're together. We don't know what their relationship is, and then we realize in the second flashback who they are to each other, and then we see what they've gone through in the third flashback, or the third memory. And it's everybody. I feel like at some point in their life has gone through some sort of complicated relationship, whether it's family or friends or anyone. And the goal for that was to show how one event could have two different reactions for two different people, and what would happen if they really addressed it in the aftermath of that.
And she kind of like the character of Chloe, she has these, problems and, these kind of things that she's struggling with. Um, and there is a feeling of kind of alienation with her. And yet she's not entirely like alienated from her community. Like there's people that are reaching out, there's people who are, trying to connect with her. And that feeling that she's kind of present, but she's not all the way present with her friend group. I was curious of like, is that a dynamic that you were trying to dig into a little bit, and what kind of attracted you to that kind of a personality? It feels like something that felt very familiar to the college experience, you know what I
Right.
mean?
No,
So can you
definitely.
kind of speak to
I'm sorry,
and
you're breaking up the last part there. Can you repeat that?
can you speak to that kind of social dynamic?
Yeah. Um, yeah, in my college years, I knew everybody. I was very friendly with everyone, but I always felt alone. I always felt left out. Not left out, but I always felt like I was doing my own thing and kind of just away from everything. And I looked at things from an outside perspective. The reason why I had this film take place in a college setting is because I wanted to capture her perspective of she's around people. And even though she is around people that do come off as supportive in a way and also like interacting with her, she I wanted to show that this is somebody also who is having a hard time saying who she is. Even like with their interaction with Trevor, at first she's hesitant because it's nothing like that. But then once the two like start to drink and they get to know each other a bit more, she's able to be herself. And I wanted to show that sense of like, she wants to find somebody to be open with, whether it's Doug or even with, Harry or Trevor. It's just for her, it's just hard for her to connect with somebody. And she doesn't, and I think in the back of her mind, she knows that she maybe never can be with anyone and never have that real interaction with anyone. So that was
Yeah.
the goal for portraying that in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an interesting terrain to explore, and I was, you know, curious if there was a kind of personal connection to that feeling.
Well, I think
So I know,
it's interesting because I think everybody, whether you're friends with everybody or you're, gone through stuff in life or you haven't gone through stuff in life, everyone has experienced that moment of isolation, especially during the pandemic. So yeah, I think it's just the goal of that was to capture that isolation for that character and to show that she wants to break out of that, but she can't break out of it.
do you have particular people that you were influenced by who, that were kind of informing some of the choices you were making in this film?
Yeah. Mainly family, mainly my family, influenced me with this film. I really, during this pandemic, I really got to really know everyone. I mean, I've always known my family, everyone knows, but like I really got to know them and what they've gone through, what we've all gone through, not just during the pandemic, but also through life in general. Um, not to sound cheesy, I'm very close with my mom. We're very like I like to say like I'm like very like it's kind of like a Norman Bates relationship a little bit, not so much like that, but like we're very close to each other, and we both have a lot of shared experiences in going through the same pain and same trials and tribulations of life. And for me, she was a big influence, and my grandmother was a big influence on this film, and really just exploring the family dynamic of what is a family and how does one go through that pain of like events that has happened in their lives and how to move forward from that, whether if it is a personal thing or a family thing. So yeah, my family is a huge influence on me, not just for this film, but also for my work in general.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the film with the audience here in San Francisco. Are you going to be able to join us for the festival or
I would love to, but unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to make it. But my dad's from San Francisco, so
yeah,
his family's from San Francisco, and so we did a mass email saying like, hey,
good.
my son's doing this. So
Right. So the
hopefully, if
family will
anyone's
be well represented.
yeah, hopefully
Um,
if anyone's in the audience seeing this, then hi,
a-
or online seeing this, hi. Great seeing you
and
virtually.
and so how can people help spread the word about the film, and what are the next kind of steps?
So the next steps for this film is we're still in the festival circuit. We have a couple festivals that we've just gotten into. We just literally last week we found out we got into the Fargo Film Festival. This film just won Best Narrative Feature there, and that festival is going to be happening in later in March. We also just are going to be at the DC Independent Film Festival near Valentine's Day, President's Day weekend, which we're looking forward to. And we just found out that we were 1 out of 5 films selected for the inaugural Credo 23 Film Festival that's run by Justine Bateman. So it's been a
Wonderful.
whirlwind of a year so far. Just getting
Excellent.
out
Well, I hope you have some well-deserved good times on these at these different festivals, and looking forward to. Is there a place online people can track the film?
Of course, yeah. You know, I'm you know I'm young, but I'm just not good with like Instagram handles here. If you want to follow the film,
Yeah,
the film Instagram is Sideways for Attention Film. Here, it's a
Sideways for Attention
attention
Film.
film.
Okay,
It's kind of blurry to see, but it's
on
Sideways for
Instagram. Yeah,
Attention Film, all one word.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you really want to kind of go whole hog with the whole early 2000s thing, you can encourage people to promote it on Craigslist. I would recommend
Oh
that.
boy.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
the most early 2000s I've done is I had people promote it on Facebook. You know, the MySpace was
yeah. Well, yeah, I know that's pretty far back in time now. My God. We definitely guarantee that you'll get like the baby boom generation will definitely be there if you promote it. Um,
definitely, definitely.
cool. Well, thank you so much, Brady. I really appreciate you, and look forward to seeing what comes next.
Thank you so much, Quinn. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Bye.